Right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stephen Haynes, Director of Wellbeing at the British Safety Council, and in this session, we're going to explore the role of the impact of artificial intelligence on psychosocial safety, in particular, in the identification of hazards and the ways in which we can best mitigate these, as opposed to the impact of AI itself as a psychosocial hazard can present. Joining us today are Kate Field. Kate is the Global Head of Human and Social Sustainability at the BSI. Her specialism is in health, safety and wellbeing, and formerly with the HSE, where she was involved in the development of the management standards. Kate has an extensive consultancy background and focuses on what impacts people in the workplace. Kate's written various papers on AI in the workplace and has a particular concern around the use of AI being used in risk assessments. Also joining us is Dr. Sally Wilson. Welcome, Sally. Sally's Head of Workplace Health and Wellbeing Research at the Institute for Employment Studies, and Sally leads health work and research and is a co-lead into enforcement on HSE stress management. Also joining us is the brilliant Chris Wagstaff, Health and Safety Director for Krona. And Chris has a super keen interest in the use of AI in workplaces. And finally, we welcome back Dr. Bob Rajan, who's the Vice President of Safety Groups UK. Bob is former inspector and policymaker at the HSE and has recently written a pretty amazing book on AI in the workplace as well. I had the great privilege of reading that a few weeks ago. And again, amongst Bob's many passions as a futurist are the degree to which colleagues are putting their hands and mouth into using AI in health and safety. Welcome, team. To our amazing audience out there, if you've got questions during the session, please pop them into the Q&A function and we'll aim to answer those as we go through or at the end. But before we get started, I just wanted to set a bit of context. Psychosocial safety is not just about health and safety, but it's integral to individual and organizational performance. And understanding the factors that inhibit or enable employee performance, culture, well-being and safety is absolutely key. Psychosocial safety encompasses all social and psychological factors in the workplace that influence our mental and emotional health, and these factors are directly connected to bottom line business outcomes. Workplace stress does not exist in a vacuum. It shapes how people think, feel, behave, and ultimately perform at work. Fundamentally, our approach to psychosocial safety is about the way we do things, and effectively understanding and mitigating stressors is at the very core of every successful business. Now, we're going to explore what opportunities AI presents for identifying and for addressing stress in the workplace. We're going to think about how AI will help optimize tertiary interventions and treatment pathways. Will get us thinking about what opportunities AI presents for supporting the well-being of people with mental health conditions. But before we do that, I want to kick us off by helping us understand the difference between reactive AI and machine learning AI. And of course, why is that important for us to consider? Bob, if I may, can I throw this one out to you?
Yes, yes, you may, Stephen. I have already covered that aspect in my previous session, but to give it a simple answer, reactive AI doesn't use machine learning. Reactive AI doesn't have the memory of past events. For example, the RP selector tool that I developed about more than 10 years ago is a reactive AI type. It's an expert-driven, rule-based system. Therefore, it doesn't use machine learning language. Whereas the limited memory AI and the theory of mind are the two popular ones today. Limited memory AI uses machine learning language. and machine learning models, and it can remember past events and learn from the past events when predicting an output for the current situation you are trying to solve. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, it's key for us to keep that at back of minds in as we go through. I'd like to explore, let's think about identification and mitigating of psychosocial hazards within the workplace. I'd like to kind of start to think about what opportunities does artificial intelligence today present for identifying psychosocial risk at work. Sally, would you like to kick us off on that?
Thank you. Yes, thanks, Stephen, for mentioning the work that in partnership with Affinity and the Institute of Occupational Medicine that I'm leading on behalf of the Health and Safety Executive, because they're currently reviewing the use of their management standards, which is obviously the go-to tool for assessing risks at work. And I think that it's not, as we all know, I imagine here, that there among some employers is very poor awareness and uptake of those management standards, and obviously something the HSE would like to see, and I think we would all like to see, is greater uptake. So I think there's opportunities there, I think, for AI to be instrumental in helping employers to assess the risk. And I think that to date, possibly HSE haven't utilised HI, or I think, you know, information technology more generally, perhaps as much as they could, to enable employers to make use of that tool. And, you know, there's potential there as well for that tool to be tailored, I think, to sectors, to be tailored to different kinds of organisations. So I think there's ways, I think, of AI making that experience for the employer of implementing a risk assessment easier, but I think also more applicable to their organisation. I think in more general terms, thinking about risk assessment, the first thing you have to do is obviously reach your employees and collect the data. And I just think there's so much more potential for AI to help employers design the kind of surveys that they need to assess risk in their organisation, and, you know, ensure that the questions they're asking their employees feel appropriate to their role, feel appropriate to the sector they work in, the psychosocial risks that they encounter. So I think that there's an opportunity at that very first step of assessing the risk for AI to improve the way that it's done, and actually be implemented in a way that's more user-friendly for employers, and hopefully encourage uptake of risk assessment.
Thanks, Sally. It'd be interesting to get people's perspectives around the virtual room here in terms of what you see, independent of AI just for a moment, what you see as some of the more common and effective ways to identify psychosocial risks at work. And Sally's obviously quite rightly picked up on surveys and risk assessments. But team around the room, what do you see as some of the more common ways and effective ways of identifying?
I love the question, if I can come in, because common and effective is probably not where we are with psychological health and safety. So I have to chuckle to myself. Look, you know, the identifying hazards, and let's stick with that as the specific question, is about looking at the data sources you've got to help you identify whether you've got hotspots. And AI potentially has, some great application for that. Fundamentally, in my mind, I think of AI as a data analytics tool. I mean, that's what it's great at. So what sort of data can you look at? So, you know, there are things like staff surveys. I don't think risk assessments fall into that. We can maybe come back to why I don't think that. But other things that can be useful are things like exit interviews, showing why people are leaving, because people are usually leaving because they're unhappy, and it might highlight what some of those problems are, whether it's people, whether it's career development, whatever it happens to be. I think there are some interesting and scary applications of AI. There's some great case studies out of places like Google, where, you know, AI is being used to analyze people's emails, to analyze internal chat, to look for keywords or signposting whether there are potential issues. So a simple example might be that AI is being asked to look for the word burnout in stress in internal communications, whether that's people's emails or chats or whatever, and that might be an indication. It can obviously get a lot more sophisticated. It can be used to sort of analyze things like absence data. So, you know, whatever all your data sources are, they can give you some potential insights. I think, you know, we have to really understand the limitations, though. You know, the output of any AI is only as good as the data that it's analyzing, and we know that a lot of that data is going to be, quite frankly, terrible and not very meaningful and fraught with bias. So, you know, it might be a useful tool as part of what you're doing, but we shouldn't be relying on it wholesale.
Thanks, Danny. So apologies, Kate. Do we think that AI, because I think you're absolutely right, we've got to understand the limitations. It's only ever as good as what's being fed. Does anyone have a thought in terms of whether AI can be used also to help plug some of the gaps in what our pictures are telling us based on how informed the data we have in our organizations could be?
That's a really good point, Stephen. Personally, I think it is. What AI is very powerful for at the moment, and is only going to get better for, is recognising patterns, trends. It's very unbiased in terms of what it presents to you, which I think is really important when it comes to looking at real issues with and underlying issues with organisational stress. You tend to find that even with really good data, if you've got an in-house health and safety team, for example, they tend to lean towards still what they think is the issue rather than what the actual issue is. That's what I personally find. Whereas what AI will be able to do is have a look at the facts. And to Kate's point, it's only going to be able to provide you information on the data that's put in. And that's why I see it as an AI assistant, not an AI manager. It should be presenting you with data and you make a decision. But I think in terms of identifying the real issues there, I think it could be a really powerful tool, but just keep it as a tool. And I think that's quite important. So there are AI models out there at the moment which tech companies are using, which will scan things like Microsoft Teams or Slack for after hours messages, and not just one-off ones, because we're all probably guilty of sending one every now and then thinking, oh, I forgot to send this, let's just do it now. However, that's very, very different to somebody who's consistently working until 1 o'clock in the morning when they're meant to be finishing at a much earlier time. That's the sort of data I think it would be really good at presenting. So going back to your original question, I think certainly got some really positive functions. It's just what we then decide to use it for, and seeing whether or not, which I'm interested in as this develops, is whether or not we will remove our bias and actually use it as we should be, or we'll just go back to the behaviours we've been doing for many years. That's the part, I'll be honest with you, I'm unsure at the moment, and I'd love to see how that's going to present itself and how businesses use that data. But you're absolutely right. I think it's going to have some real positive effects.
If I may comment, Steve. Yeah. It is clear from my three colleagues is that please don't use AI as a policeman. AI as an assistant to you. And that is where some of the data being collected by especially human resources is very worrying. And this is why I keep telling, if anything to do with health and safety, it got to be led by occupational health and safety. If you leave it to HR, that is going to create more psychosocial problems than solve psychosocial problems.
That's an interesting point, isn't it? I suppose the key on there, Bob, is it's that alignment, isn't it, of HR and health and safety with regard to psychosocial risk management. And again, slightly off topic in terms of AI, I'd be interested to get your thoughts around the virtual table in terms of why is it important to have alignment between HR and health and safety in the first place when we come to identification and mitigation of psychosocial risks?
There are plenty of examples in the internet where AI is used very vitally as a policeman rather than a tool to support the affected people. And that is where the ethical principles must be adhered when utilizing the AI to solve or help manage the psychosocial problems, especially psychological issues. And when you give me time, and after my colleagues have discussed, I can give you the type of solutions that can be used to benefit from AI to solve this problem.
Thank you, Bob. And just any quick thoughts on just building out that point about why is it important in the first place that you need, even before you get to the tools? And Chris, I love your observation about ensuring you're keeping it as a tool. Bob, your point there about don't use AI, make sure you're using AI as an assistant, not a policeman, really key. So AI, just aside just for one moment, just be helpful to get perhaps Sally, Kate, your observations about why the alignment of HR and health and safety is so important even before you kind of get started.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when we're looking at psychological health and safety, you know, there are many individual hazards, and some of those, like traditional health and safety, will interact with each other or will stand alone. But a lot of those will potentially fall over into what might be traditionally an HR domain, or they might cross over into things like the Equality Act. So things like bullying and harassment is a really great example. You know, often a bullying and harassment policy sits in HR. It's often seen as a sort of a civil claim issue because of the legislation that sits there. But obviously, from a psychosocial risk point of view, it sits in health and safety. So there are a number of areas where actually you'll need the knowledge and expertise of both of those teams to really tackle the subject. It won't sit in one domain, and the organisations that are doing the best work and adopting, Sally mentioned the frameworks, things like the international standards, ISO 45003, are the organisations that are really getting that cross-functional input. But I think kind of moving us on into kind of then how AI can help in terms of, you know, sort of managing psychosocial risk, a really good example is around recruitment. Which often sits with HR. So if we think about psychosocial risk, you know, we can have issues come up if the right person has been recruited into the wrong job, or vice versa. But basically, there's a mismatch between, you know, the job role and what the expectations are and the person who's appointed. Now, AI can potentially help and fine tune some of the recruitment, start to take out some of the bias that comes through in recruitment. But one of the things I'm really excited about is we know with psychosocial risk that one of the biggest sort of overarching hazards is around organizational culture, and culture is driven by the top of the organization. And there's a really interesting study that's been done by Fisher College of Business in the US, and they compared the use of machine learning in hiring directors with human selected boards. So basically an AI doing some of the selection versus a human panel. And they found that the human panel were much more likely to shortlist male candidates who had a big business network and had existing relationships somewhere with that panel. By contrast, the machine learning, the AI, took away all of those biases. So, you know, they weren't friends with the panel, they had smaller directors, and they had a much greater diversity of background. But what was really telling was the candidates who were recruited via that AI machine learning were much more effective. So I think that's really exciting. You know, so it depends what the definition is effective. But, you know, by taking the bias that comes out from people in terms of recruitment, we could start to see a real shift change, particularly, I think, in leadership roles, which is really exciting from a psychosocial risk point of view.
Thanks, Ken. That's a really key point. Okay, I want to jump us back into this point about the identification and mitigation, because we've had a great question that's come through as well from our member of the audience, which is, Will AI ever be sophisticated enough to determine whether someone is suffering from stress? And this is picking up on the observation that we've got many individual consumer tools which can help us identify stress within ourselves. What are our thoughts? Could AI in a corporate environment help us identify, determine whether someone is suffering with stress?
I'll go straight in with that one. I'll be honest with you. I think it's nearly there. Some of the welfare and they're effectively labelled as a well-being bot that you can speak to, can identify far quicker than many GPs can whether or not you're a specific stressor, because effectively what the bot does already is it learns that individual's input rather than just answering questions and then giving a solution based on that question set. It's much more tailored to the individual. I mean, if you've ever used a popular AI app and you can ask it questions like, how are you feeling today? Now, I did that a couple of years ago with the very first progressions of these apps. Compared to now, you can have a full-blown conversation and it's telling you things about you that you think, blimey, I didn't even realise that. Now, that's where we are now, and a version that's not specialist to workplaces and not specialist to workplace stress. So I'd say we're very nearly there. What you've also got is advantages that these are 24/7. So whether or not you're waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning and need to speak to somebody urgently, or whether or not you're having one bad day once a year and need to have a conversation, but you don't want your employer to know, I would say your chatbots are an excellent example of giving you some first sort of coping mechanisms, I suppose, or conversation starters. If you put into an AI tool something like, I've got to have a really difficult conversation with an employee, this is the scenario, how do I start that conversation? You can get some really qualitative answers in seconds. I'm not saying it fully replaces sitting opposite a person, that's a different conversation altogether, but I think in terms of early detection, as long as the information put in is individual, then I think, yes. You said an interesting word there, Stephen, which was corporate. I don't think it's there yet, where an AI tool could look at a whole different, multifaceted, layered business and just tell an employer or a business owner whether or not you've got a stress problem. But I don't think it'll be far off. And again, it comes down to the points that Sally and Kate mentioned earlier. It depends on the quality of information being put in. So I think that's kind of...
It cuts into industrial relations issue, and it is going to be an interesting years with these kind of systems when it is used for psychosocial management.
Thank you for that. Okay, Chris, really good points. I want us to move on and get us thinking about opportunities AI can present for managing stress in just a moment. But that's given us a really helpful insight into your thinking around where AI can be used to identify, I think, some key points, making sure we're recognizing the limitations. I think the alignment of the relevant functions in the organization, critical, the HR, health and safety, key as well. I think there are some benefits from what I'm hearing back from yourselves in terms of certain areas, such as aiding bias in recruitment. I think that was a really key observation. And Chris, to your point about the use of such tools in the right means. And I want, when we get on towards the close, I want us to think about ways in which we can best ensure that the tools, i.e. the bots of the world, for example, can effectively be embedded into workplaces. I think, and crucially, I think the other key theme that's coming through from what you're saying is making sure we're using AI appropriately and we're overlaying that with the human function and role. Okay, let's get your thoughts around. It would be great to open this to Sally as well. Get your thoughts, Sally, on this perspective in terms of opportunities AI presents for actually managing psychosocial risks at work. So we've identified them. How can we best manage those psychosocial risks? What role might AI present for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned earlier that if you're taking the HSE approach to risk assessment and you're using the management standards to identify areas of risk, I think there's potential for AI to help move organisations or employers onto that next step, which is what mechanisms should I put in place having received these results from the risk management tool. So I think it's about, again, it depends on the richness of the data that you have. But it's about I think positioning employers better to actually use the data and let the data predict what solutions, if you like, what interventions will have best fit, whether that be training for managers, whether that be solutions for individuals to help manage their own stress levels, whether that be getting more occupational health advice. But I think that step, what we're finding in our work for HSE, is a lot of organisations get really stuck. They run the risk assessment tool, they look at the 6 risk areas, and then they don't know what to do next. And I think that getting stuck is possibly where AI can help move them on.
Do we have any examples where that's been used? Kate, Bob, Chris, what are your thoughts on that?
I think again, I'm pro tech. I think there's a lot of advantages, but I think we're not there yet. I think, the examples that Sally have just kind of talked about are really good, but they're focused on the individual. And it's kind of reinforcing the potential bias that the individual is the problem, rather than addressing the fact that these psychosocial risks are caused by organisations. They're organisational risks. And therefore, how do we look at controls that are going to address these at an organisational level, and using the hierarchy of controls? I mean, I think one of the challenges we have is that psychological health and safety is still seen as something completely alien to the rest of health and safety, and that's not the case. The risk assessment process, the hierarchy of controls, all of your core risk assessment processes, identifying likelihood, identifying consequence, should be exactly the same. You just apply it to a different risk set. And we've all gone on that journey. A lot of us weren't experts on chemical risk. We weren't experts on work at height when we started. We've had to learn and understand those risks and what the controls are. And we just need to go on the same journey with psychological health and safety. But I think because of the terminology, and we're talking about people, and we see it in other health issues, occupational asthma and cancer, people kind of get nervous about it. But I think, there are things like AI tools being able to take away more mundane tasks. So things like some really good stuff coming out, or really interesting stuff coming out of call centres, for instance. Most call centres are using chatbots, and they triage and answer a lot of the simple questions, which is probably 80 or 95% of what a call centre might have to deal with, which is great, taking away those routine mundane stuff, and allowing the individuals who actually answer a call the harder questions to really bring the human skill set into that discussion. I think we then need to understand what the implications of that are. Is that actually the call center person who actually gets a call is often dealing with some of the much more significant and complex problems, and actually might have a greater impact on their mental health. They're dealing with people who are significantly in distress or vulnerable. So as with all health and safety risk management, as we put in a control, we've got to look at what the implications of that control is. It might be that it addresses the one risk, but it introduces something else. That is something we do day in and day out as health and safety professionals, and we just kind of need to gear up to do this for psychosocial risk.
I just jump in because I just wanted to agree with Kate on something, that yes, the approach with risk assessment should be on organisations, and the diagnostic level of using that data should be for organisations. So in talking about the HSE risk assessment, I was talking about the tool administered to the whole organisation and the pattern of that you see across the 6 hazard areas, and using AI to better tailor organisational solutions to those patterns. So I absolutely agree with you about that, trying to look at patterns and match solutions to those across the organisation.
Can I be controversial here and then go into 2 things? I'm ex-HSE. HSE has produced this standard many moons ago. It doesn't solve the problem because the psychosocial problems has increased tremendously. So we need to go back to the ground stage and reevaluate the situation. That's a controversial bit, Stephen. The other side is two strands. One is psychosocial issues outside AI, and the other thing is with the advent of machine learning AI, we're going to have people suffering from psychosocial problems. On that account, I would suggest, if I may, is that if you are using AI and you are having thoughts that things are going bad, what you need to do is, it's like driving a car. Is this person comfortable using that AI system? Is the predictability of the AI system is accurate or trustable? Is it transparent? And it should be sense of comfort to the person and sense of control to the person. Is it giving it or not controlling it? Is it driving the person rather than person driving the AI? And does the person trust the AI? And finally, has this person got experience and familiarity of using this AI? So this is called in the OHS world, the perceived safety and psychosocial issues from AI. That's where that we need to start separating managing the psychosocial issues caused by AI and using AI to understand psychosocial issues.
It depends what stage there, Bob, that you're going to bring it in. I mean, if you're bringing in an AI tool because you've already got a stress problem, I would personally say it's only going to benefit you because you've clearly identified there's a stress problem in a business. I work with business owners. They're not health and safety professionals. They're business owners most of the time. So they're looking at us to provide them competent advice to support them through that difficult time. If you're bringing in an AI tool that can collate data very, very quickly and provide you with an unbiased output or report or whatever it is you've asked for to say, here's where some of your problems are, here's how you might want to fix it, best thing to do is go and take these results to a health and safety professional. I would say it doesn't really matter, to be honest, but on your point, but proactively it would, which is if you're doing it because you don't want a stress problem, that's where I would see it more as like an assistive role, if that makes sense. So you're trying to be proactive. The chances are when you talk to a lot of business owners, they know where a lot of their stressors are. So you could use that as an assistant to say, right, I think these are areas that I've got issues with. What do you think? How do you want to analyse that and using it in that way? I just think you covered two really good points. It just depends what, in terms of safety maturity, where you are and where the business is. So it's kind of, I think, a really good point you had.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is that these large language models are doing, looking at psychosocial issues. If the data that is being going into these models are not data analyzed, cleaned, prioritized, they are not going to give us unbiased answers. So what I'm suggesting is two issues. One is the existing issue. The other issue is caused by AI use, machines, AI-driven machines or systems. So whatever is it, if you are going to use bots, those bots must have clean data. Without that clean data, it is going to be poems produced by chatbots.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Chris. And I think it does raise that really key question around we know that there are barriers to effectively managing stress in the workplace amongst employees globally, not just in the UK. And what I'm hearing from you both is there are opportunities here used effectively and appropriately where AI can be used to help break down those barriers and help to simplify the process and approach there's a couple of really, really key questions that have been posed by some of our audience, which we'll come to in just a minute, because I think they fit nicely into us as we bring ourselves to a close. I want us to get a quick sense around the room in terms of how AI, and this links back to your earlier points, Chris, about the use of bots, but how AI can be used to help to optimize those tertiary support services and those increasing optimization of treatment pathways for employees. And in particular, we've got a great question from someone in the audience, which is what's being done or can be done to better address AI or anxiety in the workplace.
So I don't mind kicking that off, particularly the AI anxiety piece, because it comes down to communication and transparency. You know, you've AI anxiety is understandable. You know, there are lots of nuances, and that covers all generations. It's not just an older person or a younger person thing. You know, there are a lot of nuances there. You know, and as with all health and safety, the most effective way of doing that is really good consultation, participation, and communication. So being clear about what's being used, how it's being used, how you can raise concerns, getting people involved in the adoption of AI, in the say of what tools are being used. You know, they are all the things that, you know, you should be doing as you would with other health and safety risks. I think in terms of the tertiary, I think, you know, there's a piece where AI can be a really good tool, a way of to help people identify sources of information and help. You know, a lot of organizations will have a huge range of sources when, you know, of support when we're talking about psychological risk. So there, you know, there'll be a whole range of training which might touch on issues around career development or performance from a psychosocial risk point of view. You know, having an AI kind of chat box that can talk about what your concerns are and then signpost to the different tools an organization might have, you know, whether that's on their website, whether it's maybe through an EAP provider. I think that's really good. So I think that kind of almost personalization of it is great. I think, you know, I touched on it in one of the answers chat, we do need to be really careful though about when we're collecting this kind of personal data about how that's being stored and how that's being used, because there are potential legislative issues. We're talking about personal health data, which means that it might have to be held for a certain period of time. So, you know, there are a lot of extra layers that need to be thought about when we're thinking about these tools.
I mean, if I may come in quickly, our social welfare budget is booming, going out of control. So the government is going to use the AI tools in that area. And in about 2-3 years' time, we will have wealth of data for translating and transporting into OSH practice at the workplace. But one of the things that they have to do is how to ask, we heard from Kate, how they are going to collect the personal data, clean it, and put it into the large model so that anybody can access and use it. So I think it's going to take some time. We have to be a bit patient.
Thank you for that. There was an observation in the questions which was interesting, because it links quite nicely into this observation about how can we best use AI to optimize support infrastructures. And if we think about support infrastructures in the workplace, not just about the tertiary supports, but actually that primary and secondary level of support, which line managers, leaders, colleagues play in that role as well. And it was a really interesting observation, which is the best line manager will listen first, then ask questions, and then only respond, not just to provide a pre-programmed response. And any bot will have its limitations. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there are huge issues for line managers, and I think that bots would outshine them in a lot of respects when dealing with psychosocial and pastoral issues with their staff. I think there are just so many demands on many line managers. I think many aren't able to line manage us in as personal a way as they would like to, but there are also a lot of line managers who are quite overwhelmed by enforcing policies on dignity at work, on managing mental health health and wellbeing at work, signposting people they line manage. And I think there's huge potential for AI to be there, giving tailored support to line managers, you know, not just in terms of, of the content of what they say, but also the manner, and also tailoring it to the needs of their direct report. And I do think there's massive opportunities there to boost the quality of line management.
Yeah. I mean, I to give you a personal context to this one of my manager many years ago wrote, "He's not English, he can't write English. He's an attention seeker." There are two issues that came up in my discussion when I wanted to talk about my career progression. So the AI can take that kind of bias so long as the data that it is used to train the model is good as gold.
Thank you, Bob.
I think for me, you know, the line manager is often at the heart of really good psychological health and safety, or really bad psychological health and safety. And I think, again, this is where organizations need to, and where AI might help in terms of recruitment of line managers, that they do have the right sort of empathy and emotional intelligence for these skills. You know, I think one of the challenges we have is that we still have a situation where people are promoted often into people management roles because of their technical expertise, not because of their people management expertise. And I think, you know, there's a certain amount of training and experience which can make somebody a better line manager. I think there are some people who should never be line managers. They don't have the skills and they should never be let near a team. And then there are some people who are almost natural at it. And I think if we really want to kind of change that approach, I think we need to change fundamentally how we think about technical promotion versus people line management, and have, you know, again, right person for the right job. If the job is around line management and the performance of a team, then let's make sure that the line manager has those skill sets and isn't just really great at the technical side of their job.
Thanks, I love that. Opportunities to capitalize on AI on that fundamental issue we see in many organizations of the accidental manager. I love that. I've got one closing question, which came in from the audience, actually, which I think is a nice way to bring us to a close. I feel like we've scratched the surface on what is a really key issue, a key element, and a great opportunity to capitalize if we do it right. The question here is from a member of the audience. If you're a CEO, where on their list of priorities is psychosocial risk? They're going to invest in AI. How can health and safety and wellbeing professionals ensure it's considered high up that list? What are our thoughts around the table? If you have one simple sentence to describe your response.
I'll go first, and I'm going to be really frank. If it can save you or earn you money and affects the bottom line positively, it's going to become very high up your priority list very quickly.
Okay, so data to demonstrate that. Is that the response, really, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Chris.
Is he a troublemaker? Can I get rid of them?
Do you mean Chris?
I was just going to say, I don't know if that was a bit loaded there, Bob.
No. That is what I have seen it throughout my career. There are certain times, these are troublemakers. You remember the trade union people names were kept and shared between construction industry because they thought, these guys, if you get rid of these guys, we don't have problems. So all of those things come in.
Thank you, Bob. Key point. Kate or Sally, any closing thoughts to this question? If you're a CEO, where on the list of priority is psych risk?
I think the reality when CEOs are looking at AI is not even psychological health and safety isn't even on their radar, because a lot of, let's be honest, CEOs don't really understand what AI is and what it does. So this is where it's important that the health and safety professionals need to start having an understanding of the implications, both positive and less positive, in terms of AI solutions. any organization that is adopting AI for whatever means need to be doing a risk assessment, which will cover both things like cybersecurity, but also things like what impact it's going to have on people. All that's set out in the International Best Practice Guide, ISO 42001. So although a CEO might not be thinking about psychological health and safety when they're thinking about AI, they do have to assess the risks. And if they do that properly, the people side will be picked up.
Okay, so almost in the nice neat closing there, it's the in terms of getting CEOs, getting leadership to buy into psych risk and helping demystify, align psychosocial risk with bottom line in terms of messaging. AI does have a role, from what we've explored here, within reason, in helping build that picture to demonstrate the why. I think it feels like the starting point really is we've got to build the picture, demonstrate the business case, get the alignment. Psychosocial risk and bottom line performance are exactly the same things. Is that kind of what we're saying?
It's a cause and event analysis, isn't it?
Thank you, Bob. I'm super mindful. We have just gone a minute over. I'm sure our amazing esteemed chair is going to be kicking me later for that. I'll be getting a stress risk red flag for that. Steve, back to you to bring us into lunch, but just closing, Sally, Bob, Chris, Kate, thank you ever so much. That was such amazing insight. I feel like we could have gone and chatted all day on this subject, such a key issue. Thank you everyone that's also posed your questions into the chat. There's a huge number of questions that have come through as well, so it's great to see what fantastic and interesting subject this is. Steve.
Thank you, Stephen. You're absolutely right, mate. You've gone almost 2 minutes over now. All I can say is be grateful this is a virtual session, sir. Listen, thank you all, Kate, Bob, Chris, Sally. Amazing debate there, expertly chaired by Stephen Haynes. That last question raised leads us very neatly into our session, which is after lunch. It will start at 2:20 and it's focused on using leadership and influence to shape the future of AI. Thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you at 14:20.
All the best.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks, team. Lovely to see you all.
Thanks, guys.